What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the CPA Zone, the podcast where we discuss tax strategies and accounting tips for entrepreneurs and real estate investors. My name is Ryan Pulis, and our company, the Pulis Group, offers tax planning and advisory services for entrepreneurs like you. Whether it's bookkeeping, tax planning, or CFO services that you're looking for, we've got you covered. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the CPA Zone. Today, we're joined by a special guest, Jack Martin. Jack's built a career investing in mobile home parks. He's one of the co-founders of 5210, I'm sorry. And today, we're going to talk about investing in mobile home parks, what the tax benefits offered, and I'll let Jack go ahead and give himself a bit more of an introduction. So, Jack, why don't you tell the audience a bit more about yourself, and we can dive right in.
Yeah, zoom out a little bit. I'm a Minnesota boy by birth, one of 17 children, which sounds crazy, but I was one of the older of 17. So like go to work right away, hardworking Midwestern kind of background or upbringing. I've been investing in real estate for 25 years. I started out in land, then I got into single family homes, did about 2,000 single family homes. Got into apartment, which is where I thought I was going to finish out my investment career until I tripped over this thing called mobile home parks. And they are so unique. You know, if you get past the stereotype of trailer trash, which is, you know, everybody that has not doesn't understand the intrinsics will probably look at it through that stereotype. But when you get past that, you really start to understand why these are considered cash machines, why they are so stable and they survive things like COVID and, you know, the GFC. And then the tax benefit really starts to stand out when you look at it through the lens of an LP.
All right, awesome. So I guess what got you interested in mobile home parks, or how did you discover them, and what made you want to invest?
You know, it's really interesting. This was not I call it serendipity. I wasn't intending to focus on mobile home parks. I was actually trying to bring a vacant apartment building in Flagstaff, Arizona back online. And the city wouldn't let me because they didn't have enough parking. Right next door, there was a small mobile home park on a half acre, and it was just enough land to solve the parking problem. So I bought it, thinking that I was just going to turn it into parking. But long story short, cities was fierce about that never being an apartment building again. So now I own a mobile home park. So um, we repositioned it, and it was the simplest stabilized cash machine that I had ever owned. So when I discovered that, I said, "Hey, we got to do this at scale," and that's when I pivoted away and focused solely on mobile home parks.
Okay, awesome. And now you guys are in four different states. I think Texas, Arizona, Florida, and was there another one in?
Yeah, and we're about
Yeah.
next week. We'll also be in Nebraska. We're buying our first park in Omaha.
Oh, awesome. All
So
right.
yeah, we have about 1,800 lots across 5 states. We got about 35 employees. We've been doing this for a while.
Okay, good deal. So you guys, do you manage all the parks as well, or is that do you use a property management company that to kind of handle that for you, or how does that work? Is it similar to
Initially, we tried third-party property management. Third-party property management works really well in most asset classes, but it doesn't work very well in mobile home parks unless they're fully stabilized. So if there's all the infill is done, all the homes are sold, they're all owned by the tenants, then it can work. But getting there is a lot of hard work, and you have to be able to pull all the levers in house. So
That's
we built our own internal property management company. We do all of our own internal maintenance and construction and home sales and all that kind of stuff in house. For the purpose of your audience, I'll share just really quick, like what makes mobile home parks unique as
yeah.
compared to all other commercial real estate. First of all, a mobile home park is kind of like a giant parking lot where instead of parking cars in each one of the parking spaces, you park a home and the tenants own the homes. So for us to fill in vacant spaces, we'll buy them directly from the manufacturer and set them up, and then we'll sell them. So the conversion from an empty mobile home park to a full mobile home park includes the sale of every single home in there. So it'd be kind of like having a dealership and you're selling cars, but they never leave the parking lot, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then the income stream comes from they're basically renting the lot or the piece of land that their home sits on. They pay all their own utilities, they do all their own maintenance. We don't have any expense associated with the individual homes. So that's what makes them really stable. The unique thing about mobile home parks is they're the most affordable housing solution. So there's nothing that even comes close. Usually about half the cost of living in an apartment, and in some markets it could be as low as a third of a cost of living in an apartment in the same neighborhood. But what's really unique is the stability that's created by the tenant's home ownership. So when a tenant is making a decision to move into a mobile home park, they're making a permanent housing solution because they're buying the home. They don't own the land, we do, and they have to pay a rental fee every month for the land, but they own their own home. So they have a vested interest in the success of the neighborhood, like they care about it. So you'll see that mobile home park tenants stay 10, 15, 20 years. We have tenants in some of our parks that have been there since it was built 45 years ago. They're still in the same home. Um, and then the other thing that's unique is the turnover that is typically the most expensive event that occurs in traditional rental real estate.
Yeah.
It's expensive. You lose your tenant, you have to go do repairs, you have to remarket it. Sometimes you have to offer incentives to fill it up again. That dynamic is really not present in the mobile home park business because if a resident owns the home, they're paying the lot rent. And if they decide to move, they sell it to the next person who pays the lot rent. So that gap doesn't exist.
Gotcha.
And we're not repositioning units. We're just accepting the lot rent payment from a new resident who purchased the home. So that's what makes them so stable. Not necessarily the most attractive thing about mobile home parks, but it's one of the top things that separate their intrinsic behavior to all other real estate.
Yeah, well, early when we first started, you had mentioned that they are considered recession proof. Is that the reason why you kind of have that stability in there? Is there other
Yeah,
factors?
well, I'll shine a light on a few things. So first
Yeah.
of all, when we started to look at this asset class in a meaningful way, meaning let's devote the balance of our investment careers to it, we looked at all the markets that we had an interest in, and we tried to find evidence of foreclosure of mobile home parks in the markets that we were interested in back during like 2008 through 12.
Okay.
Couldn't find a single one.
Oh,
So what ends up happening is, I mean, think about the difference between if you own an apartment, things get difficult like they did during the GFC. Your tenants are going across the street because the guy across the street lowered the rent, and you have this vacancy, and this kind of becomes like rent wars, right?
yeah.
Whoever has the lowest rent gets all the tenants. And then you have tenants that are moving out of apartments and they're going down to mobile home parks because it's more affordable. And you have this dynamic where you can't solve for the lower revenue that you have because the marketplace is void of the demand, or you just can't command the same amount of rent that you once did.
Gotcha.
Well, worst case scenario, you fast forward on that. Even if you're a great operator and you chose a great property in a good neighborhood and you're, relatively conservative with your debt, you still, when the debt becomes due, and typically that's a 5 to 7 year maturity date, which a lot of debt came due during the 2008 to 2012 timeframe,
Yeah.
you may not meet the DCR requirements. And so suddenly you're in a position where you cannot get financing and then the lender takes the asset back. In mobile home parks, the opposite is true because not only are you in a position where you have stable people aren't leaving. I mean, it's super expensive to leave. You either sell your home and move. You can't move it. It doesn't make any sense. Even though they're called mobile homes, they don't actually move. Once they're installed, they're there forever because it's too expensive to move them. And there's no cheaper place for them to go. So during 2008 through 12, mobile home parks were getting more demand and a line of like on the waiting list, people seeking to get into the park and choose that as their housing solution, the likelihood of the quality of that tenant was higher than it was prior to 2008 because they're coming from a higher income bracket. They're coming out of a more expensive housing solution, and they're just seeking to kind of stabilize and lower their housing expense during a recession. So recession proof is a really strong word, Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah,
Resilient,
that's a better.
resistant. They are really mobile home parks can survive recession better than anything that we've seen. I think another thing that's really interesting is during COVID, when there was a high degree of strategic default. So tenants knew that there's a moratorium on eviction. So like they didn't have to pay the rent, so they just didn't pay the rent. And the penalty was 10 months later when the moratorium was lifted, they got kicked out. Boo hoo. That was their view, right? That's not an honorable tenant, but the truth is that that was taking place. We knew apartment guys that were down like 40% on their rent collections just because of that thing. And they couldn't evict these people. So it's terrible, but that was just the dynamic that existed. So in the mobile home park business, and this is something that few people know, the penalty for non-payment of lot rent when eviction occurs is the forfeiture of your home.
Mm.
So if during COVID, you went 10 months without making your rent payments, when the moratorium was lifted, you would have had to come current with all penalties, fees, and back rent, or you had to walk away from your house.
Yeah.
Most mobile homes are worth 50 to 100,000 bucks. Who's going to do that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
because of
training
that,
pay probably was.
yeah. So because of that, we had about 700 lots that we were collecting rent on, and
Okay.
we collected 100% of our rent. There was no default at all
Oh, that's
during
awesome.
COVID. So like you take those kind of intrinsic qualities and the way that they're set up, that's what creates the stability. And so that recession resistant quality, call it recession proof, but nothing is proof.
Sure.
Uh, it's just amazing how they weather the storm.
That's good to know. Yeah, I did not realize that. Um, Now, when you buy lots, are you creating new lots? Are you buying existing lots and sort of improving them? Do you do both?
Yeah, mobile home parks are really difficult to develop. So most of these were developed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. There
Yeah.
are there are a handful that get developed in kind of unique locations on an annualized basis, but there's more parks getting knocked over for redevelopment into apartments or condos than there are new ones being built every year. So this is a shrinking asset class. The opportunity to invest it's becoming more and more scarce, particularly since the institutional owners have been buying these up for the last decade. Professionals like us are buying them up at a pretty rapid pace, and the supply is dwindling. So the mom and pops who originally built them, that pool of supply is shrinking and shrinking every year that goes by. We probably only have 5 to 10 years left, and then the consolidation will be complete, and there just won't be any opportunity. So we're buying existing parks that are not professionally managed, and there's an opportunity for us to improve income and lower expenses, and create a nice yield for ourselves. Um, but we have a little bit different strategy, and this will kind of lean back into the tax side of things
Okay.
than most sponsors out there. So the challenge that you run into in any real estate transaction where there's limited partners and an operator is the operator's motivation is to sell, because that's how they take the promote.
Yeah.
So for me to get paid for my efforts, I need to sell relatively quickly. And the more often I do that, the more profits I make. But that's not necessarily accretive to everyone in the deal. So on the LP side, particularly if you take bonus depreciation, you'd prefer not to recapture that bonus depreciation, and you'd also prefer not to experience capital gains. So if there's a way that you can buy it with like a longer term tax hold, or like a longer term hold strategy, potentially hold forever until you pass away, and then your beneficiaries get the stepped up basis.
Yeah.
Um, that's something that LPs would prefer. So we've positioned ourselves to where that's what we're doing. It will have some full cycle assets that we acquired early, 6, 8, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But on a go forward basis, we're more focused on the long term tax strategy, so that RLPs can avoid the tax.
Oh, nice. Okay. So it is more of a long-term play then for your investors generally.
Yeah, if you look at this asset class, there's like their mobile home parks create more tax benefit than most other real estate. So you start with that. Then you also look at the fact that this is a shrinking asset class. So essentially, when you find a really nice park in a good location and you go through all the effort to reposition it, like that's an irreplaceable piece of real estate.
Yeah,
So like if you sell it, you may not be able to find another one like it. So you put those two things together, it's one of the few asset classes that deserve a long-term hold strategy.
that's good to know. Yeah. Is it a shrinking asset class because the cities, towns, or whatever, they're not zoning for it and allowing new parks to be developed? Is that why?
It's mostly zoning. So, but there's some tax revenue nuance there as well.
I see.
If you think about like a 30-acre piece of property, you get about 10 units per acre, so you could have about 300 units there. And those produce on average about $500 a month in lot rent
Okay.
across the nation, right? Well, then you take that same 30-acre piece of property and you put 4 stories of high density apartments on there. And not only does your number of units per acre go up 4 or 5 fold, but the revenue is probably $2,000 per unit. So your revenue goes up fourfold as well. Now look through that um, from the lens of the Texas,
Yeah.
department. In any municipality, they're going to get way more tax revenue from that property as 4 story apartments than they would as mobile home parks. Then you also have to look through the lens of what the cost of the expenses associated with them providing city services to that piece of property. Challenge that you run into with mobile home parks is, there's two things at play there. One is greed because they want to maximize tax revenue, but the other is the awareness of the amount of expense that we have to allocate to those residents who live at that property in our city, and the expense is greater than the tax revenue. So
Gotcha.
it becomes a losing proposition for them to give zoning for mobile home parks. So
That makes
then
sense.
what occurs is the only place that you can build mobile home parks is outside the city, like in a rural environment, and where you run into the challenges of utilities. So it just becomes really difficult to execute on to get a mixture of utilities, public services, and zoning, and then demand. So if you build a mobile home park in the middle of nowhere, yeah, you might be able to solve for all those things, but then who's going to move there and purchase a home?
Right.
So we see a lot of that activity in Texas. Most of the parks that get built every year are somewhere in Texas, at least parks of size.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really difficult to build a new park. It's you'd think it would be simple, but it's
Yeah.
not.
I didn't realize that until I asked the question earlier, and you said it's really a shrinking asset class. So that was learned something new on that today. But I guess go back. I would like to go back a little bit and talk some about the tax benefits because this is a tax and accounting podcast. We talk about taxes a lot, and I'm sure the audience would love to know about some more about the tax benefits of investing in mobile home parks. Can you just talk a little bit about your strategy there? As cost segregation studies come into play and utilizing the bonus depreciation. Uh, what would a typical deal look like for one of your LPs in terms of
Yeah,
their?
so obviously there's some underlying nuance with respect to the current 2017 Tax Act sunsetting 20% per year. We can talk about that, like layer in what's on the table at the Senate and what's being proposed, because this all could kind of come back. But assuming a normal, let's assume that this comes back so that we can talk about it through that lens to 100%, which is what it was back in 2022.
Yeah.
Um, each time we acquire property, we go through what's called a cost seg study, and essentially and I'll try to simplify this for your audience, that the value of a property is divided generally into 3 separate buckets. One would be land, which cannot be depreciated. Two would be land improvements, which are they fall under a 15-year straight line depreciation schedule, and they qualify for bonus depreciation. Um, and land improvements are things like the roads and the underground infrastructure, sidewalks, pedestals, pads, fencing, landscaping, lighting, like all of those kind of things that aren't a building, but they're affixed to the land. It does not include the mobile homes, by the way. So those are personal property, so they're separate. And then buildings. So in a mobile home park, there typically is either no building or there's a single building that would be used as the clubhouse or the office or
Gotcha.
something of that nature. On occasion, there could be, um, like a shower or a public bath or a pool house or something of that nature.
Okay.
So those structured would be the third bucket. So building, we look at it really simple. It's land improvements, and buildings.
Gotcha.
So, and if you look at the value of a typical piece of real estate, and let's use like an office building, for example, the land is still going to have similar value if it's in the same neighborhood as a mobile home park. It's all worth, there's zoning could potentially give it more value or less value.
Sure.
The land improvements would be like the parking lot and the sidewalks and the landscaping. But the building is going to be the lion's share of the value of that property. So both from a revenue generating perspective and also from a cost segregation perspective, the building is going to be the most of the value. Whereas in a mobile home park, the land improvements will be the greatest amount of value. So in a really simple demonstration, if you had a $10 million property, land is probably worth somewhere in the $10 to $20 million or $1 to $2 million range. So 10 to 20%.
Gotcha.
And that really depends on where it is. So if it's in downtown MSA, probably worth 20%. But if it's out, on this outskirts, more rural, it's probably worth 10%. So same thing would exist with any land value, price per square foot in those two separate locations. Underground infrastructure is typically going to be about 70% of the value. And then building would be, the remaining percentage of the value. So because there's such a high percentage of land improvements, all of which qualify for bonus depreciation, that's where the real power comes in.
Yeah.
So this would also be the case with like golf courses. Most of the value is the land improvements. It would be the same with like an RV park or even a cemetery. So like most of the land improvements is not derived from a building. It comes from improvements to the land itself. Because of that, they can garner substantial bonus depreciation. And the way this works is in the calendar year that we purchase the property, we'll complete the cost segregation study, and then we'll take the bonus election, and all of those passive losses are given to the LPs. So those are passed on to the LPs. In 2021, each one of our investors, 2021, 2022, when we first started taking bonus depreciation, they were getting well in excess of dollar for dollar. So even into 2023, when it started to sunset, we were still delivering dollar for dollar because there's such, the debt has a play in this.
Yeah.
And we don't need to get into the weeds with that. But the answer for your audience is that if you're seeking passive losses on your K1 that you can either use to offset the income from this investment, but you could also use it to offset income from like the sale of other real estate or other passive gains that you were exposed to that year. So they're just a tremendous amount of value. The challenge that you have with bonus depreciation is when you sell the asset, those get recaptured.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, any capital gains that you are exposed to, there'll be tax there as well.
Yep.
So the intention and kind of the interesting way that we have positioned ourselves is it is our goal not to sell. So that doesn't mean some life event might show up where a sale was required, or potentially, one or two of the LPs might need liquidity. But we run these out at like 7-year chunks. So for the first 7 years, we're going to execute this strategy. And at the end, where our intention is to extend for another 7 years. And at those intervals, if an LP needs to exit, they can. But for the most part, this is a tax strategy. So we're going to purchase the property, reposition it, refinance it, and return capital.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
then rinse
awesome.
and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So you end up deleveraging the risk because you get all of your capital back out of it. And then you've not paid bonus depreciation recapture. You've not paid capital gains, and you still own the coupon forever.
Yeah. That's huge. Because I know like with more traditional like apartment buildings, let's say you do the cost sake study, and the cost sake study is still out of the after you take out land, 70% of the value is still your 39 or 27 and a half year property locked up in the building.
Yeah.
And the rest comes in that 7 or 15-year property. So it's much smaller amount to be bonus depreciated. And then most of those LP deals, like you mentioned earlier, they just like 5 or 7 years, they're done. You're cashing out. Now, you could always find a new one, and the bonus depreciation still in play at that time. Use those losses to help mitigate your gain if you reinvest in the same year. But I like what you mentioned you guys are doing, where you're getting this huge big one year one write offs because you have much more property that's eligible for bonus depreciation, and then your investors, it sounds like they can actually hang on for a while. They don't have to cycle out so often. So that I'm sure that's appealing to a lot of people that are trying to stay away from dealing with that depreciation recapture every 5 or 7 years.
Yeah.
They would like
No,
to hang on to an asset that
the,
produces.
the hardest part to solve for is finding the right assets.
Yeah.
So, like if you're buying fully stabilized mobile home parks, you could still take that year one passive loss, but the challenge is getting your capital out of the deal.
Yeah.
So, because there's not enough room in a stabilized mobile home park to go refinance or add a supplemental loan on top of an agency first. Let's call it in year 3 to 5 to get your capital back out. Then you end up holding on for 10 years before there's finally enough equity in the property, just simply due to rent growth for you to take meaningful capital out of the property. So that the secret sauce is finding the right properties to acquire.
Gotcha.
And then you spend the first 3 to 5 years repositioning them to where there's a dramatic increase in value, therefore allowing you to do a refinance and return capital.
Okay. Awesome.
So we're still able to execute from a timing perspective. It's similar to what you would in a traditional syndication, except for you're getting your capital back and you get to reallocate. You keep the coupon and you don't pay the tax.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like the way that's set up. Yeah, so you said you guys are just now you're going into, was it Nebraska?
Yeah, we're closing on our first park in Nebraska in about a week.
Okay. Awesome.
We're agnostic to where we are, with exception to the markets have to be the right markets. So they need to have like a minimum median home value.
Gotcha.
Challenge that you have buying parks kind of in the middle of nowhere is that A, there's no demand, and B, you can't sell homes at scale.
Yeah.
So those two things hold you back from executing on the infill strategy. So, typically there's vacant lots or there's vacant homes, and those need to be solved for. So if there's not enough significant demand in the market, and the delta between a single family home in the same neighborhood and a mobile home park or a mobile home in a park is not great enough, then there's not the affordability incentive for people to be attracted to buy a mobile home.
Gotcha.
But like rural Georgia, you can only rent homes. You can't sell them, right? So, and then we're sensitive to regulatory pressure. We'd like to be in a favorable environment when it comes to landlord tenant.
Sure.
We have to be able to execute. We have to be able to catch up if the rents are behind market and those kind of things. So there's about 25 states that we like, and there's various markets in each one of those states that are really attractive to us.
Okay, awesome. So potential for adding new parks and additional states going forward.
Yeah, right now we're looking at a deal in Idaho. We're looking at a deal in Utah.
Awesome.
Um, we've looked at deals in Montana, Wyoming, um, Ohio.
Okay.
There's quite a few states that we like, but we're pretty patient. We're waiting for the right deals.
Yeah.
We're not in a rush to purchase. Our LPs are patiently waiting in line for us to find a deal that makes sense. And when we find one, we know it, and then we open the door and let LPs come invest with us.
Awesome. Are your LPs they all, are your deals all for accredited investors or?
Yeah, it's all accredited.
Okay.
It's we're a little bit more advanced in the space. This is not a new venture here. It's
Yeah.
a fairly proven venture. So Most of our LPs are programmatic. They'll drip in on every deal. Different check sizes, and there's different economics for different check sizes. But I think that it deserves to be shared that early. Typically, what we've discovered is that when someone's early in their passive investment career, they're writing checks of 50,000 or whatever the smaller amounts are. Their focus is usually yield. Like, I want to get my money back as fast as I can, and I want to make the most that I can. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, more programmatic $1 million check writers who've been doing this for a while, their focus is how can I gain the most tax benefit and avoid paying tax in the future?
Yeah.
And I want to get my capital back, and I'd love to get a nice coupon so that I can rinse and repeat. But the focus is a little bit more aimed at tax, actually quite a bit more aimed at tax than it is the $50,000 check. So our strategy is just the way that we're pursuing this is a little bit more shifted towards larger check writers who are seeking tax advantage. But we allow check sizes as small as 100 grand.
Okay, awesome. That sounds good. We're coming up on time. While I still have you, what's the best place for people to find you? And we're going to put all your information in the show notes and
Yeah, probably the easiest way is to go to our website, 5210.com, and that's 52ten.com. Go to the contact page, fill out a simple little form, and then I actually will respond to you individually. It's a little bit unique. Like, I manage all my own investor relations myself. I do all the reporting. So yeah, rare in a business of this nature that you actually get to speak with the founder.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I care about the relationships. I don't like to let investors in that are going to be toxic.
Yeah.
I like to know who my investors are, and we end up having a relationship. So yeah, that's probably the best way to connect.
All right. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time. It's been great talking to you, and I learned a lot today about mobile home parks. I'm sure our audience will enjoy it as well. But we'll have to do this again sometime, and maybe if the tax bill passes and the 100% bonus depreciation comes back, which I have a pretty good feeling we'll see that, then we can schedule another podcast and talk some more about it.
Ryan, it's been a pleasure. It's rare that I get to nerd out on tax with
Yeah.
them on real estate. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good one and take care.
Sounds
That
good.
about does it for today, everyone. If you found value in this episode, please leave us a 5-star review and hit that like and subscribe button. Until next time, have a great day. One last thing before you go. We have put out a free ebook for our listeners. You can find a link to this in our show notes. It's called the Rental Real Estate Investor Tax Guide and covers all the basic tax related information for real estate investors. We hope you like it. Again, go to the show notes to download your free copy. So that about does it for this episode of the CPA Zone. Thanks for listening, and I hope you found something valuable that you can take away. We are taking on new clients, and if you'd like to work with us, then go to our website and fill out the client intake form on our contact page. This can be found at thepulisgroup.com/contact. That's ThePulicegroup.com/contact.